The modern breathalyser is a relatively common sight in Britain, where drink driving deaths have plummeted in the past 50 years. Credit PA on the 8th of October 1967, a Shropshire driver had the dubious distinction of being the first motorist to be subjected to a roadside breath test in the UK. The suspect was required to blow into an alkalizer tube that was filled with crystals, and if these changed color, the driver would be taken to the police station for urine and blood tests. The phrase green crystals thus entered the car owner's vocabulary. Drink driving legislation dated back to 1925, when the Criminal Justice Act stipulated that those found to be intoxicated while in charge of mechanically propelled vehicle could lose their license for 12 months. In December 1927, Dr. Gorski, a Marlborough police surgeon, had a suspect blow into a football bladder to measure the exhaled air's ethanol content. The doctor subsequently testified that the motorist was 50% drunk. In 1953, Captain Robert Borkenstein of the Indiana State Police invented the breathalyzer, the first truly practical device for blood alcohol testing at the roadside. By 1960, the Road Traffic Act stipulated that it was illegal to be unfit to drive through drink or drugs, and 1962 saw voluntary blood and urine tests in addition to the offense of driving when the ability to drive properly is for the time being impaired. But there was still no maximum prescribed level of blood alcohol, and traffic officers would have to carry out subjective tests, which ranged from asking the driver to walk in a straight line to stand on one leg to have the suspect close touch his eyes and touch his nose. The impact of driving while intoxicated had also been widely debated for many years, both in print and in popular drama. The cleverly devised 1947 B feature To the Public Danger depicted an intoxicated motorist as a selfish and amoral cad, and 1965's The Material Witness was a surprisingly hard-hitting low-budget drama about the consequences of going over the limit. Ernest Marples, the Minister of Transport from 1959 to 1964, exhorted none for the road, and in 1964 the Central Office of Information commissioned its first drink-driving public information film. The central theme was succinct: if the husband is going to become soused at the office Christmas party, let the wife take the wheel of the Austin A60 Cambridge. However, as the 1960s progressed, there was the growing sense that the law was failing to keep pace with the growth of mass car ownership. By 1965, the government announced that they were devising legal blood alcohol limits for driver, and on the 7th of October 1967 it was illegal to drive with more than 80 mb 100 milliliters of alcohol in your bloodstream. The act also empowered a constable in uniform to require a breath test of anyone driving or attempting to drive if there was a reason to suspect that they had an excess of alcohol in his or her body. The government purchased thousands of breathalyzers and spent £350,000 on publicity for the latest rules, but to state that they were unpopular in some quarters would be an understatement. Barbara Castle, the 1965-1968 Minister for Transport, received a letter decorated with a picture of a dagger and containing the words "Well get you yet, you old cow." Drink driving education campaigns remain common. Credit Department of Transport. Meanwhile, a Motorsport magazine editorial of September of that year claimed that persecuted motorists are thoroughly fed up with the treatment meted out to them, including the threat of indiscriminate tests for drivers only by breathalyzer following any minor traffic misdemeanor. On the 23rd of October, Richard Crossman observed in his diary that the act was regarded as a really unpleasant attack on working-class drinkers. "We are in danger of becoming known as the government which stops what the working classes really want." Publicans grumbled that their takings were reduced by a third as the habit of driving to and from the pub suffered a marked decline. Government research had found that the 2-hour period from 10 p.m. to midnight, i.e. around pub closing time, endured more accidents than any other similar period during the day, but this did not mollify some landlords. G.E. Wheeler, of Grantham's The Royal Queen, complained that people will not walk if it is raining. Looking at footage of that era, such as the movie-tone newsreel None for the Road, there is the distinct sense that the saloon bar was a place of refuge from the vicissitudes of the late 1960s. There, chaps in sports jackets would gather to grumble about how this infernal breathalyzer was yet another example of Britain's decline, together with the 70 miles per hour motorway speed limit and the Beatles being awarded the MBE. More recent drink-driving campaigns, such as this one from the 2006 World Cup, continue to be aimed at male pub-goers. Credit PA to state that the past is another country is a cliché worn as smooth as a bald tire, but this does not mean that it is untrue. One sign of how remote 1967 now appears is a letter written to Barbara Castle: "Thank you for giving my husband back to me. He used to go to the public house alone. Now he takes me with him to drive him home. The green crystals were introduced at a time when many drivers regarded their car as the last bastion of freedom and when the skills of all would-be suburban Graham Hills could surely be relied upon as they piloted their Singer Vogue home from the Dog Duck. To be deprived of motoring, even if they had indulged in one expensive gin and tonic too many, was therefore an infringement of their liberty. It was an attitude echoed by an edition of BBC Radio's The World This Weekend, where the interviewer, presumably playing devil's advocate, asked Ms. Castle, "You're really spoiling my fun as a motorist. So, Minister, what's the idea behind it?" Her answer was as simple as it remains pertinent over 5 decades later: the idea is to save your life.